Good morning and welcome to another podcast of Iconic Freedom, the Formula. We are talking about setting standards for accountability and responsibility in this journey of personal development. Let each care for self and all will be cared for.
You don't take responsibility for your action. That's why you sit there, and that's why you are a direct reflection of these cops. I have these pictures. This is not you bald there. I want you guys to show you this. This is somebody doing hand sanitizer. He's more worried about protecting himself from COVID than protecting the 19 children that were bleeding to death. This is a cop on his phone smiling. There's nothing funny about 19 children bleeding to death on their cell phone saying, I want my mom. And then when their mom tried to run in, what did they do?
You have a question?
Yes, we have a young lady here with an I Love Lucy t-shirt on. Stand up and...
Take your hands off her, David.
Oh, excuse me.
I can see the shirt.
So, thought I'd try to...
What's your name?
Hi there, we're here
What's your
tonight
name? David, will you take your hands away? What's your name, dear?
Early in the morning.
Give her the mic.
My name is...
David.
Yes, I have a lady here with me.
I noticed. Will you take your hands off, David?
Oh, excuse me. A question here that I kept expecting to hear in a class of students. Stand up, young lady, and
Take your hands off her.
Hi, my name's Amy Resnick. I'm from
What is confidence?
Confidence is me believing in myself.
Give me 5. What is integrity?
Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody is looking.
Give me 5. Are you a leader or a follower?
A leader.
What's the difference?
Because I think for myself.
Give me 5.
I'm actually not bad about this. I'm 100% right on this. I don't give a shit about the scientific explanations. People, if they identify as a woman, get to compete in sports. If that's not fair in the short term for a variety of little competitions, I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit. Because the societal interest of including trans people in society trumps stupid competition. Full stop. So I'm right about this. You're wrong about this.
What do you think of that?
I mean, I think it's very easy to give away things that aren't yours to give away. I doubt she's actually an athlete, that woman.
That was running through my head, this whole conversation.
Other thing is, my God, she's got a delightful little frisson of self-righteousness there, hasn't she? Oh my God, she's just like, I am so good.
About evidence, thank you.
And for performing her self-righteous, centering herself.
Right.
Seeing the whole world as a stage upon which she gets to perform her virtue.
Right.
So I was checking out those clips this week and I found them pretty fascinating, especially with the topic that I wanted to discuss, which is about everything communicates. It's kind of interesting. I kind of fell upon this idea. Somebody else had discussed it at a meeting that I was at one time, where they said, everything communicates. And as I was sitting there, I thought, well, that definitely is true. And then what I realized is that everything communicates both verbally and non-verbally, duh. And it was kind of interesting because then a few years later, I had seen a show where I think it was with Skeet Ulrich and Margulies. I can't remember that girl's name. But anyways, so what was interesting was this drama show that I saw on Broadway with some friends, and we were sitting there, and this captured my attention a lot because of, my whole endeavor of just, wanting to dismantle things and kind of understand for myself what communicates, what doesn't communicate. Well, everything communicates. And the sister walks in and says, I'm not disturbed by what you do. I'm disturbed by what you don't do. And I thought, what an interesting line from a playwright to say something that was, to me, so profound, because we really are doing and not doing. And what you don't do says a lot, as much as what you do as well. So what do I mean by this? So what you do, what you don't do. When I used to counsel couples or individuals, if they were lamenting about a relationship or somebody they were dating, and this person didn't call me, they didn't even leave a message, and it's like, and so then I kind of came up and I just said it. I said, well, that is the message. No message is the message. So what are the messages that people are communicating? So fascinating, right? So that first clip by Alex was about the Uvalde shooting and everything. And what were those police officers communicating? I mean, going up and, putting sanitizer in your hand or smiling while you're on the phone, not going into the room versus going into the room. I think we're all aware of, what that whole mass shooting was all about. But it's fascinating because we might, and clearly he's very emotional about it. A lot of people have a lot of emotion about these things. But my thought process is that all of these things that these people are doing are communicating something to us. And then the question is what are we paying attention to? Are we paying attention to the emotion from the gentleman that is sitting there and making the comments, or are we looking at what is happening on the video and in those photos? What is it that those police officers are communicating? Are they communicating their concern and the drive to save lives, or are they communicating something else? So then in the second clip with Lucille Ball, I thought it was so fascinating. If you watch that clip again, you'll see after the first individual that she tells David Sheehan to take his hands off of her, you'll see in her face, what is she communicating? She's got a very stern look on her face. Her eyes, are... they're very tight, they have a very patriarchal, type of look to them. It's very authoritarian, right? Very authority-like. It's like, what are you doing? Take your hands off of her. Which, again, I think it's very fascinating. And then what was interesting was that Sheehan did it in that clip 4 different times. I mean, that's what somebody snipped out of it 4 different times. So what is Sheehan communicating? And of course, I love the fact that Lucille Ball is calling him out. If you've seen the movie The Sound of Freedom recently and talks about, that movie, for me, I thought was pretty powerful in, child human trafficking, that kind of stuff. These things are out there and they're communicating to us. People are communicating by what they say and what they don't say, by what they do, what they don't do. Then that next clip, I just thought was adorable, where, I don't know if that's the parent with that child that was doing that, but what was fascinating was teaching them the responsibility and the accountability for being a leader, not being a follower, they're sitting there making value judgments, what does it mean to have integrity and character? Well, from listening to this podcast, integrity and character are built from accountability and responsibility. I own all my choices and I can respond to all my choices. That's what builds integrity and character, right? That people can observe. So I thought it was really fascinating. I thought it was a great example. I don't know how old that child is, but what a great lesson to teach somebody. To me, I just think that's fascinating that at an early age, if you want to brainwash somebody, why don't you brainwash them with stuff like that, right? Instead of all of this other wokeism kind of garbage that's out there. And then the last one I thought was fascinating. That was taken from a clip from an interview that they were talking about transgenderism and that kind of stuff, whatever. What I found interesting, couple of things, was the interviewer and the interviewee talking about this clip that they had watched. That interview is about an hour and a half, I think, in total. But they were watching this clip of this girl. I don't know who she was, but first of all, she got very emotional, which means she's out of reality, right? You know that from listening, that when you go into emotion, you're out of reality. So everything that she says at that point is questionable. Beyond, right? I mean, everything in life is questionable, but what she is doing is even more questionable because she's having an emotional reaction to it, which means something's going on, something triggered in her. Now, she is an idiot. I'm just going to say it, flat out and full stop on that, You're just an idiot because you don't know what you're talking about. You are having an emotional reaction to something that you really don't have command of that information. But the interviewee clearly and beautifully stated that, oh, look at her. She gets to be all virtuous. She gets to have a stage for her virtue where she gets to get up there and say how terrific and wonderful she is. So these are some interesting forms of communication that I think are very fascinating. We're hearing lately this whole thing of for the greater good, for the greater good. But what's fascinating about people wanting to do for the greater good is because they don't want to have to be held to be accountable and responsible. And that they want a society that will accommodate their inadequacies. They're not looking at becoming something for the greater good. If you had your self-interest that that's really what you wanted to do, you would just do it. You don't need to pontificate about it. So we say everything communicates. What is it communicating when you have to pontificate about it? It's kind of funny. My friends Dan and John, I have this conversation and, kind of this flippant remark of when people will talk to us and they'll say, oh, I'm all about this, whatever this is, insert whatever, subject matter, right? I'm all about, being good to people, or I'm all about being kind, which to all of us, we start laughing. It's like, you're not about all of that, any of that. You say you're all about it, and the likelihood is you're not about any of that. When people say, let's be clear, and then they start talking, it's like, but you're not very clear. So what I start listening for when, let's be clear about this, then I start listening for where's all of your bullshit, because that's what's coming out of your mouth at this point. You're not being clear. You don't need to tell me that. I should be able to understand that. I should be able to figure that out. You don't need to guide me there. Thank you. Don't lead the witness. Thank you very much. But I think it's interesting when people want to say these words, these phrases, and trying to communicate, what are they really trying to communicate? When people want to say, oh, well, that's just common sense, or everybody knows, what are they trying to communicate to you? That you should not be questioning this. Whatever it is that they're saying, whatever comes after that statement, you should not be questioning it. Well, that's just a bunch of BS, right? I mean, that's, what kind of a conversation is that? That's not a conversation. That's dictatorial. That's authoritarianism. These are people that are trying to tell you how the world is. No, you figure out how the world is for you. That's what the whole idea behind the formula is it's building those standards for yourself, creating that universe for yourself of being accountable, owning your choices, and the responsibility of being able to respond to those choices. I don't need somebody to tell me what my universe is. I can observe it and figure it out all on my own. You can observe it and figure it out all on your own. One of the things that I posted this week on social media was socialism, when you don't want to develop personal accountability and responsibility. And I mean, you think about it, that's really what it is. That's going back to that thing about the greater good, that, that's, we should all be doing for other people. And why? What is that about? What is that virtue signaling about? I say it at the beginning of every podcast. Let each care for self, and all will be cared for. But it's a fascinating thing to me that as I go through my week, as I go through my days, and not just watching and listening to things in the media and on television and movies and yada yada, but also the people that I work with or that I interact with, clients, whatever, that everyone is on this train of virtue signaling. I want to be a good person. Well, if you're a good person, you're a good person. Why? What is that built from? Being a good person is built from being accountable, being responsible. One of the things that I wrote down this week that I thought was kind of interesting in regard to all of this, and people trying to develop themselves, that self-development is, people want to improve their life, but they never connect that it's me that has to improve my life, my choices, my responsibility. They have to clean things up. Doing for others, but really you're doing for self, right? So if you want to improve your life, then you have to start looking at the choices that you're making and your responsibilities to those choices. And are you paying attention? Are you conscientious to those choices? Or are you just kind of, freely going around doing stuff and you not really paying attention to what are the outcomes that could be possible for that? So circling back to the idea of everything communicating, let's simplify it. What are your choices communicating? First to self, then to others. And it's not that you have to try to please others, and I don't want to get into that type of codependency, where people are image building, but asking yourself as you're trying to build your own standards, what are my choices communicating to myself? If I am a person that is not on time, what is that saying to myself? And what does that say to other people that I'm never on time? So everything you do communicates what you do and what you don't do. When you don't do by being on time, when you do by being on time, what do those things communicate? But more importantly, what do they communicate about you for you? Because you're not so worried and trying to image build to other people. You are really wanting to solidify the qualities of yourself. You want to develop qualities about yourself that you feel good about. That's your self-interest. So maybe being on time is one of those things. Maybe it's not, maybe you don't care about that. Maybe you're like, c'est la vie, I'll get there whenever, but it doesn't matter. Okay, well, that's fine. Then that's your universe. Then you can also observe how people respond to that. Do some people care about that or they don't care about that? And it's just something to look at. It's a small example of your entire universe of wanting to look at what am I doing that communicates? What am I not doing that communicates? And understanding that everything you do communicates to yourself first and then to the world around you. And are you managing those communications for yourself? Are you satisfied with those communications? Are you happy? Do you feel good? Your self-interest is always to feel good, right? So do you feel good about those communications? And when you don't feel good, when you have that transgression, what have you decided for yourself in terms of how to manage that differently? And we are at the end of another podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. Hit that like button if you would. Share this with your friends and family. You never know what they might get out of this. If you'd like to subscribe, feel free to do so. You can do that on the website, link down below. My email is there, so if you have a situation that you'd like me to cover on the podcast, that would be awesome. I'd be happy to do that. Send me an email.